let's start off by ladies first, right? Asking Catherine, what in your view, we talk about how to achieve an effective charity board. What do you think should be the key focus of a charity board?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, I think an effective charity board would focus on 4 things. Something easy to remember: SPG, having fun. S for strategy, P for performance, G for governance, and finally for charities, it would be fundraising. So for strategy, I would say, the board has got to be forward-looking, and the board has to be able to help the CEO and the senior management to plan the strategy ahead. Not just for the next year, but for the next 3 to 5 years, because things do change, and with the collective wisdom of the board, they can guide the charity in the new direction. Performance would really be performance measurement. So helping the management to actually evaluate whether the plans that have been put in place, are delivering the right results, and if not, what can be changed. And then, of course, there will be governance. I don't think we need to talk more. We've been talking about it the whole morning. All the issues relating to governance to make sure that, the charity is well run. And of course, fundraising. And it is important because as a charity, we do not derive a lot of income from, income-generating activities. So fundraising would be important. So therefore, having a board members who are ambassadors, who are willing to step up and talk about the charities to their friends and to be able to help with fundraising would be important.
Okay, let's have the view from another chairman, Daniel.
I'm Daniel from Care Corner. I think sustainability for the organization is important besides governance. And like Catherine, I think sometimes most directors like to focus on the financial aspect, but I think you have to look beyond financial, like the mission and vision of the organization. And I think as compared to profit organization, the main objective is growth. For non-profit, the main objective is the death of our mission. And that has not been the thing that charity organization look at. So sometimes the directors can push the management staff towards profit, or rather, I think this is very common in Singapore, is how much a reserve do we have? I think we need to look beyond that. Having good reserve does not mean it is well run. Thanks.
Yeah, Wendy? I think before we go to Ando, from your perspective, what do you think as a grant giver, what do you think an effective board should be?
Okay. Definitely from the grant side, we always ask about impact. Impact to the people you serve, impact to the clients you help, impact to also the volunteers who's offering their help, impact to also not only your own mission, but also to Singapore at large. So in that sense, an effective board is is a bunch of people who collectively come together, work with the community, work with their stakeholders, both government, non-government, resource experts, working with the international organizations as well, learning from each other. I think that is a good example of an effective board. And at the end of it is really, what impact do you serve the clients you work with, the people that you're trying to help? I think, to me, that is effective board. Thank you.
Yeah, that should make the grant application very simple. Impact. Before Ando speaks, I just want to remind you that if you have questions to ask, there are papers on your table. Just write them up and hand it over so we can address them as we go along. You don't have to wait until the end of the panel discussions. Yeah, Ando?
Thank you. My name is Ando. I've been in the social service sector for the past 8 years. And to me, the hallmark of an effective charity board would encompass a strong board to start with, all right? A strong board that has the diversity of talents, that has gender diversity as well, and more important, have the right skill sets as well as the passion. But passion should not be missing, all right, from the board members. And likewise, for a strong board to work effectively, you also need the climate of trust and mutual respect between the board members as well as the ED, or the Chief Executive Officer of the organization. This is essential, not only for the strategic growth of the association, but also for basically the two partners must work together to deliver the desired outcomes of the association. And another factor that I thought that would be very interesting, because we shared about this during our lunch meeting, is that all of the organizations, the board members must clearly articulate and appreciate the clear vision and mission and the purpose of why they are involved in the charity. This is very important. Apart from being committed to a charity as a board member, you must also know what your mission and vision is and how to actually deliver that and direct all activities towards achieving that outcome. And any society, as in the code of governance, accountability and transparency is very important. All right, we are accountable to the public for their charity dollars, and all the stakeholders, as well as those who have an interest in our charity, in a way that is both transparent and understandable. So, apart from the annual report that we produce each year to tell how our sector has been performing, how our organization has been performing, I really like the idea of David during this morning's sharing session about Mercy Relief as well as the Red Cross, where they actually put on their website the activities that are being conducted as well as how they actually spent the donation dollars towards achieving that goal, which I think is very important. For any organization to move forward, there's always must be a process of learning and improving. Likewise, at the Singapore Association of the Visually Handicapped, we have always looking at ways to enhance not only the way we manage things, but also in our governance, in our talent retention, and most importantly, it was mentioned today about HR specialist professionals. We have on board a HR professional who is now in the MNC. He's serving on our board, as well as quite a number of accountants, as well as even a legal advisor as well. So we need to tap on all these talents. So in a nutshell, the board itself should comprise of a diversity of talents that are both committed and has the passion to serve the association. And for any organization, they must, any board members or any board itself, it must drive the purpose, the fit for purpose. All right. Not only does the organization need to have a good structure, policies in place and procedures, but it must be able to achieve its goals, its mission, and deliver its services more effectively. For example, we do not want a board member to just come tell us and just say, okay, we'll just deliver whatever services we currently have. I think it's important that the board itself should go beyond that. It should identify those service gaps in the industry and see how best it can bridge this service gap to bring about the desired outcomes for the intended beneficiaries. I think this is very important. And last but not least, of course, all charitable organizations, we have to be financially sound and not only seen, but also put in place prudency in our way we handle public donation. All right, and on that, thank you.
Thank you, Ando. I think we mentioned this subject, which I also had in my presentations about the EED and board relationship. So while we're at it, maybe if we can hear from Catherine. Do you feel that is a big issue? Because I read somewhere that the churn of EDs at non-profits are actually quite high as well. So how do you think that the issue can be resolved?
Well, at the end of the day, I think you have it in your slide somewhere that the board, is a social system. So relationship between the board and the ED would really be about communication. So obviously it has to be based on trust, respect, and clear, open communications. And I guess it is the responsibility of both parties, the ED as well as the board, to make sure that the relationship works. So, well, at the end of the day, the board is usually the one who should be the one who selects the CEO or the ED, and there should be very clear distinction, right, of the responsibilities, like what you have mentioned in your slide. So that should be clear. So within my organization, Community Foundation of Singapore, for all the board, and all the different committees, there are terms of references. So we all know what each what the board directors are expected to do, what the committees are expected to do, and similarly for the CEO, I have a job description, so I know what I am expected to do as well. So this would actually be, helps a lot in communication, so we know, what each of us are supposed to do, we know our roles, our responsibilities, and then, it facilitates discussions and communication going forward. But a lot of time, I would say, is really invested in building up a personal relationship. We have to invest the time to, meet as a ED, as a CEO, to meet with the various board directors and their committee members to hear their views, to get their buy-in, and also in a way, be able to, have consensus being built, because the last thing we all want would be like long meetings where no decisions are being made. So the role of a chairman is actually quite important, because the chairperson would be the one that is setting the tone and the culture of the whole board, and in a way the entire organization. And also, the chairperson would be the one, that should tie back everybody at the board meetings, so that to encourage, a efficient decision making.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Daniel, I actually want to come to you. I noticed in your how should I say? Not quite a terms of reference, but you had a document for your board members when they first come on board.
Right.
And not just the roles and responsibilities. Interestingly, they actually had. It actually started off with expectations, as a board member. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how it facilitate a more effective board and also a board and management relationship.
Maybe a little history of how we actually had about a number of organizations which we consolidated, and we have about something like 60 directors. So it took us some time, and for a number of years, our directors just come and rubber stamp. We felt that moving ahead, we need to have something more solid than that. And people who understand the thing. That's the reason why we stayed down what is expected. And also, we came from a very small organization before, and it grew. I think our people came to understand our vision and mission, and more people come along. And because of that, we came out with that expectation. We have to retire some directors, and we need to set out the expectation right. So that's the reason why we started that. That's it.
Okay. I've got a question from the floor addressed particularly to Daniel. How do you establish initial trust and maintain the trust with your ED?
I think just now I mentioned that...
This doesn't come in from your ED, okay?
A background to it is that we grew from the ground up. Governance was something which 10 years ago we wanted, but was very hard to implement because we have so many people. And to get enough directors on the board is a challenging task. So we had a very good management team. Again, I stress on the mission and vision. And we believe so much in it that they went extra mile. I would like credit given to our management team. And so over the years, as we consolidate, we also build in this new governance, and also we train our directors actually to understand what governance is. And at the same time, we're also bringing professional people. Just now we were talking about HR, and we're talking about whether can we pay market rate for CEOs and all that. I think sometimes you have this notion that profit organization, they pay the top dollars. You find that it's not necessarily true. And your staff must believe in what they are doing, and it's meaningful. And then you can attract them. It's our CEO took a pay cut, but he came in. And even our management staff, we didn't pay the lowest in the market, but we paid above the mean. And over the years, we try to staff in more professional people. At the same time, we are also getting a lot of professional directors onto the board. So having a smaller group, smaller board makes it easier for me now. In the past, I have no time. I have 60. If I was to see them once a week, it takes me a whole year to talk to them. So
okay.
I don't know.
Wendy, maybe we can ask you this. Just now when you say that when you were evaluating charities for making grants, you look at the impacts. Do you also look at their management strength and the qualities of the management team?
We do selectively. Maybe let me just give a quick spiel on how Tote work with our partners to administer many of the programs across 6 sectors of arts, culture, social, education, community, sports, and even education sectors. So because of the spread of our activities, we do work with many partners like NCSS, EIC, National Heritage Boards, National Arts Council. We don't do it on our own because we don't believe in one size fits all. We want to right size some of the governance considerations. Largest charities, I'm sure if they take a lot more funds, then they will be subjected to more considerations. Smaller ones, and we look at it from an organizational capabilities perspective. We don't necessarily say that just because you are new and you are small, we don't offer help. We do look at it differently. But at the end of it, it's back to the purpose. If the purpose of those considerations are well executed in terms of communication, in terms of having a performance, and there are appropriate reports, either performance reports or even audit reports to say that the board have a very good hand, the management has a very good hand in how things are being executed at the ground, how you serve your clients. And we're not looking at quantity of services, we're also looking at quality of services. And in combination, if you get that right, and we don't necessarily hear you, we do our checks with IPC units as well, both at the ministry levels as well as MCCY level, COCs. Where we can, we will definitely provide the right support through our partners as well. But I think the key message here is it's not one size fits all. We want to be able to right size it. We want to be able to ensure that we enable our partners and our beneficiaries to do the things they need to do at the ground without handcuffing them, without controlling them too much. But to say that we give our funds with one eye closed, I don't think is something we do. We still want to keep our eyes very big, very open as well. But we definitely will want to make sure that we work with our partners and our beneficiaries, and of course the management and the board of the charities to make sure that everything is well run. Because ultimately, I think a lot of discussion this morning was about public distrust. There's a lot of international examples whereby one, that public distrust is affected. Government regulators have to react to it. Funders like ourselves have to react to it. And guess what? Your donors will definitely react to it as well. Not to mention the beneficiaries will be affected negatively as well. So with that in total consideration, when we look at an application, we take things, I will use the word right size in terms of governance framework. Thank you.
Can I just add a bit? Community Foundation of Singapore, basically what we do is we manage donor funds. So right now we have over 100 different donor funds, and these are established by private individuals as well as corporates, and also some volunteer groups. And one of the things that we do is really to do the due diligence on behalf of these donors. So even before we would present or recommend or talk to a donor about a particular charity or a program, we would have done our own duty first. So, just want to share a bit about how, we do it, which, strategic planning is very important. So one of the first things we would look at when we meet up with the charities is really to talk to either a director or a senior management, to get them to articulate what is their strategy. So what are they looking to do? What is their vision and mission? So they have to be able to articulate that, and they have to be able to at least talk about a plan of how they intend to go about achieving some of these specific goals. So having clear strategy and a good vision and mission is important. Secondly, like what DS Ang mentioned earlier, governance is important. So the first check is really, going to the charity portal to see what is already listed up there. So if any charity, has not complied with any of these particular codes of governance, we would make further inquiries and ask why. Then, of course, would be finance annual reports, the financial statements, and then finally, it would really be the people. So it is very important, when you're doing a donor stewardship, get somebody who could really talk about, what your charity is all about and what you're intending to do, what kind of impact or change you're trying to make to the community. So, obviously, governance plays a big part. When it comes to getting a donor confidence. And I would say after that, then we would look at the programs and whether the programs are effective. Because normally, when the donor says, okay, I'm interested, in supporting this particular area, help me to find a particular program or a charity that can run this program well and can reach out to the right beneficiaries, then we would look at, the program aspects of the work.
May I be allowed to add on regarding the earlier statement I made about the relationship between the board members and the ED? I think by virtue of the fact that I'm the ED of the association, I have to earn that trust of my board members by the way I handle matters. And of course, what Catherine has rightly mentioned, establishing relationship with board members, every individual board members is extremely important. All right, I would say the courtship between the board members as well as the board as the executive director is a long process. All right, but it is essential to effective governance because good governance has to work hand in hand with an effective charity board. This thing is inseparable, and to do that, the first point of contact, ED itself, has to establish first the trust and the mutual respect between the board members as well as the ED.
Okay, good. The next question I have here is very interesting because it's about fundraising. Wow, we're going to be here until 6 p.m. And I want Ando to address this from an ED's perspective. But the question is, my observation is that board do not believe their role is also in fundraising. As a result, a lot of organizations do not grow or are unable to strengthen their organization capabilities. How can we get them to raise their fundraising responsibility?
We don't subscribe to that notion. All right. I believe for our organization, Singapore Association of Visually Handicapped, everybody has a part to play in fundraising, and more so the board that sets the direction and go towards delivering the successful outcomes to our beneficiaries. In our board, basically, when there's any fundraising events, we will first tell the board, give us your contacts, all right, to get the funds first, all right, or be part of the fundraising machinery. So they have their contacts, they open doors for us to go and visit certain firms of their friends or contacts, for us to make the first introduction. Then we will convince them, all right, you get your staff to be involved in our CSR activities first. Don't come with the money. Involve your staff first and see the kind of work that our staff are doing for the beneficiaries and how the beneficiaries have benefited from the programs and services that we provide to them. And thereafter, you go back and think about it and see whether you can part with your donation dollars to us to help support the program. I think that's very important, all right? Because you outrightly just tell them donate money. First, you must convince them that what is the money going to be used for, all right? And where the money eventually goes to. And that's very important. So in our organization, basically everybody has a part to play. So when it comes to donation draw, whether they like it or not, we just say, okay, mandatory for all board members to take 200 tickets and sell them. All right, and to set the example, all staff must also sell, but of course in lesser amounts. All right, because we are serving the blind community, we also find the blind community should also be part. They are not necessarily just the beneficiary; they should also be helping themselves. Meaning, go to their friends or relatives or associates to get them to actually donate towards a worthy cause. I think that's more important. Everybody has a role to play in fundraising and not just a specific fundraising manager. I think most of the small outfits, they don't have fundraising managers. The staff themselves will have the double up and multitask on that.
Okay, maybe Daniel, how do you get your board members to involve in fundraising?
We have occasional meetings with the board just for fellowship, and we also have our special staff just dedicated to do this, and he will go around visiting, getting directors as well as also corporate sponsors to come in on this. We avoid golf games.
Okay. Actually, before I come to this, there's a lot of questions here, but one of the questions that I often asked is about performance evaluation of board members. What is your view? I'm sure you do performance evaluations. I want everybody to participate in these discussions. But do you think that it actually contributes to board effectiveness? And how do you think board performance evaluation can be done better?
It is good, but it is something we have just introduced 2 years ago after we consolidated. And so we are breaking in to our directors. So we get them to evaluate themselves first. Okay. But over time, we want to change that. Yeah. It is necessary, I think. Yeah.
But how do you make sure that the assessments are objective and actually how do you then follow up? Do you have a process to make sure that the feedback is being looked into?
Yes, we have a nomination committee that does look into this, and then we sit down and we talk about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Catherine, you want to elaborate on it?
Board evaluation has been done for the last few years for my board, and it is initiated by the chairman. So the chairman at the board meeting, once a year would ask the board to fill up an evaluation checklist, and then after that we would consolidate and see where are the areas where the board directors have ranked themselves lower than the rest. So usually there would be 1 or 2 areas that the directors would feel that more work needs to be done. And because an organization changes over the years, the needs are, have also changed, will change over the years as well. So in our case, in the most recent board evaluation, it was highlighted that, okay, the board could do more in marketing. Because for the longest time, we do not really go out and market ourselves. When we first started, it was all about having the processes right, making sure that the governance portion is right. Then after that, it was about measuring the performance, making sure that the services that we roll out, are the kind of services that are required by the communities. And then, now as we are going into our 10th year, we are starting to look at, hey, maybe we should be, doing more in the area of marketing, doing more in the area of telling better stories, and encouraging more people to join the good work of doing philanthropy. So, evaluation is actually a very good way for the board to reflect on what they have done over the past year and to see, what else that they could be doing going forward. Because as I said again before, a good board would be one that is actually forward-looking and helping the senior management, to plan for the future.
I find that, usually in board evaluations, the company secretary comes out with a form and everybody tick, and everybody tend to give themselves a 4 or 5 out of a scale of 5, right? How do you make sure that, there is objective assessments and weaknesses are being pointed out? Do you have a process beyond the standard checklist to make it more effective?
Again, I would say it is communication and openness by the board. If everybody wants to take 4 and 5 and everybody wants to say, hey, we are doing a good job, there's really nothing much we could do. But having said that, yes, most boxes are 4s and 5s, but then when there is a number 3, then it's like, oh, why is it 3? But frankly, it is really all about trust. And when the board directors, trust each other, they are open and they are willing to talk about issues, that is where, real work is being done. So again, the chairperson is important to be able to elicit that trust and to get people to actually open up and talk, and not just talk about the success, but also talk about, areas that can be further improved.
Can I add on?
Yeah, Ando, yes. Because I want to ask you specifically,
right.
Do you get involved in evaluating the board?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But in a very informal manner. Right? Usually what we do, we don't have a formal evaluation for our board members. But what our board members are required to do is that our chairperson or the president will actually dictate each member of the board to spearhead a particular project. And through that project, we'll observe the outcome. And from that, in a way, we informally evaluate them. Right? And for the ticking of boxes, like the 5 or whatever, we do that for our staff. And you're right, it's always 4 and 5 and all that. So that's why we always bring in a moderator that is also involved in the part of the process of praising the staff. All right? But for board members, we do not do a formal evaluation. We actually task them with spearhead different projects. For example, fundraising. Then we see what's the outcome, and we receive feedback from the people who are involved in the fundraising process as to how has he performed, all right, very informally, so to speak. Then we know whether he should be retired in the next 2 years or so.
Daniel, you want? Yeah, yes, Wendy, please.
While we don't measure board performance from a funder's perspective, but it's something that we also highly encourage the board to be very involved in the program evaluation of the programs. I think we are working in a culture whereby our donors, our public, our regulators in some ways also want very evidence-based decision-making at the charity sector. And many of the times when we speak to many people, even recently when we spoke to about 260 participants from the government, from the regulators, from also non-profits representative, many of them felt that they want to do it. They want to be able to do more evidence-based programming, they want to show performance, but they find it very hard because they don't have enough resources, they do not know how. So I would like the board to really think about how can they also equip their own charities to do more evidence-based programming. Work with the various partners like the NCSS through VCF funds or whatever to upgrade their capabilities in that area, because we all know that the public do demand a lot more evidences on why they are potentially offering funds. Government funders and also Tote ourselves, we are encouraging program evaluation. So an example was last year when we worked with mental health with AIC, NCSS and IMH. One of our things we wanted to do was make sure that whatever programs we put out there under our mental health initiative is supported by an impact assessment. And that is at the industry level as well for the mental health strategic initiative. So we also want to encourage the board to think about program evaluation. rather than just evaluating their performance as a board. The involvement, I think, is important. The oversight is important as well.
Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, Daniel, maybe you can add how do you manage that performance evaluation process?
Our challenge today is not so much the performance evaluation, because getting directors on board is also quite difficult. If you put that in front first, you kind of discourage them. But we put it in place that unless the director is really underperforming, we would do something about that. But I think our challenge is not evaluating them, it's getting the right people on board. And given the governance and all that, it's even tougher now.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, there's a questions here which relate to director's performance. How do you deal with a director who has lost interest in the missions or become disengaged?
For me, it's quite simple. I'm quite tough about those things. But I think it's not so much how to. Why do you lose interest? Personally, I would spend some time with him to find out. But I think one of the ways that we before we bring them on board is that we actually get them involved, like in the subcom, which does not need them to be in the main board. And from there, we move them up. In that way, you find that whether the person has a sustained interest or not, if not coming on board, then not attending our meetings and all that, then that will be a difficulty. We don't want that to happen in the first place. So we involve them at various levels. And sometimes I'm always on the lookout for who's the next person that we want to bring on board and all that. And also to provide for the diversity is also important. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. This next question is very interesting because it talks about money. The question is actually, I don't know why it's addressed to Catherine. It says that there's the board on the board of charity directors now has a lot higher responsibilities, even higher than responsibility as a listed company, which I think is true. So why do we still say that insist that serving on charity board should not receive fees? If you wanted to encourage more professionals to come in and join charity board, shouldn't we be paying certain reasonable fees?
Well, coming from the donor's point of view, if as a charity, all the directors are being paid directors' fees, just like for a for-profit, it would be very, very difficult to get any, donations. Yeah, so most donors would like their, donations to go to the end beneficiaries. We are already working very hard to encourage donors to actually fund the operations of a charity. So, people working in charities don't work, on, just love and fresh air, right? We all have families to feed. So, yes, we may not be demanding, top-notch salaries, but at least, something fair, something that enables us to feed our children. So that is something that the donors I guess they can accept and recognize now. But if you say to pay for directors, I think, to pay for the directors' work, I think it would be quite difficult. Frankly, for me, if I have to go and speak to a potential director and say, hey, join my board, I would be talking about, the benefits of joining my board. It could be the exposure, it could be, the group of people, the dynamic group of people that you'll be working with. It would be, all the different kinds of activities that you would be able to engage in when you join, my organization. So at the end of the day, the people that we are targeting are already established professionals, people who are, successful in many ways. So this couple of $1,000s of director's fee is not really going to make much of a difference to them. So I would really want to go for people who have the heart and who really wants to give back rather than, wanting this, couple of $1,000s worth of fees.
Yeah. Daniel?
the other term for charity organization in Singapore is VWO, Volunteer Welfare Organization. And I heard this from, I think it was Beyond CEO who said this. Both volunteers comprises of the paid volunteers and unpaid volunteers. I think directors are unpaid volunteers. And that perspective is a better perspective. And because if you don't, like what Catherine said, you don't have the heart or you don't understand the mission and vision, it is very hard to pay the directors based on fees. It's not a good idea. If the director is afraid of the risk, then I think there's also other ways of covering that risk through insurance. But the directors should not be coming in for fear that, like what you just said, kia su, kia bo, kia cheng hu. Directors must have the heart. If directors don't have the heart, whatever amount of money is really will not be able to entice him. Okay.
I've got a question here that addresses to me. It says that what are the terms of reference of committees? For example, internal audit committees and finance committee. We can talk about this privately after that. There's a question here about the term limits as well, which is talked about this morning. And the question here is, does the 10-year term limit apply to the total length, or does it apply, or can it be on specific committee roles? Right. So that means if you serve on a finance committee for 2 years, and if you switch to programs committee, then you refresh. I think the different concept, I will ask the panelists to contribute later on. There's difference between the concept of succession planning and board renewal. Right? If you move, I know of some charity where they rotate key office bearer or program chairmen. They need to step down after a few years. They moved on to another committees. I think this is good succession planning, but the person stay on board. So the 10-year rule, I think, is not so much on the succession planning on key office bearer. It's actually on the board renewal as a whole. Should a person stay on board for more than 10 years, despite irrespective of which committee they serve, right? So maybe Catherine, you want some a view on that? Oh.
Well, for us, we are we are setting ourselves an even stricter guideline. We are trying to move towards a maximum 6 years. So right now, my board has a maximum 3 terms of 3 years, so maximum 9 years. And we are trying to see if we could work towards the corporate, the corporate level of 6 years. And I guess it is good to have renewal so that you bring in fresh blood, fresh lenses, people with new skill sets. But at the same time, like what Ando has mentioned, it is a courtship. So you spend all this time, trying to get to know the directors, and before you know it, they are ready to step down. So continuity is an issue that has to be managed.
Well, for SAVH, we establish a staggered terms for our board members. This to ensure that there's a revolving door of new members within the board itself. I think this is important because it preserves a balance of those with institutional knowledge and those new board members who can bring fresh ideas, more creative ones, and more forward-looking plans for the association. And I don't know whether it's a practice among most of the VWOs, but we do stagger our terms. So every 2 years, our members have to stand for election. And it's also a blessing also. I don't have the full board that retires after every 2 years. It's frightening for me because I rightly mentioned courtship is very important to me. All right.
Okay. Daniel, I think you have a lot of experience managing that board renewal and succession planning.
I think one of the key thing in diversity is age also. So this is some challenge that we are facing, is that we are recruiting younger directors, but they, and in view that they will take up leadership role in the, like recruiting them for chairmanship later on. But by the time they reach that stage where they can take up more bigger role, we find that it's time for them to leave. And so this is the thing that we're looking at. But we actually have a way. Just now I mentioned that we have those in the board and those like subcom. We get them involved in the subcom and later on kind of resurrect them. But I think it's the problem. It's a challenge that we are facing because we also want new directors, and you get them about 40-something. At the time when they really can contribute, it's like they cannot. So this is a challenge for us.
Yeah, Wendy?
I got no views whether is it 10 years makes sense, more than 10 years makes sense. Should it be a rule? Should it be a guideline? But I think what's important is back to whether the board is being renewed with the right people. The people that will be able to drive the charity in a world where everything is going through a very fast-paced changes, a lot of disruptors before you know it. The renewal only makes sense if the board is able to navigate through those disruptions and allow people to then stay nimble, stay relevant to the mission, to what you want to achieve as a board. And it's back to what's the board's aspirations as well. If the board is very highly inspired to want to do more, to stretch themselves, to stretch their mission, then, bring in more people, renew it if you have to. I think, so personally for me as well as from a funder perspective, I think I would take a view that it's whether the board is able to stay relevant, and to me that's also the key question here.
Yep, please.
On the contrary, for my association, I'm always very concerned about the disruption of long-cultivated networks and contacts when the person leaves especially. And it's not uncommon for that may lead to a loss of dedicated comradeship, supporters and donors as well, once a person leaves that position. This is always a concern that I have.
Yeah, I think I also have run across charity where it's quite depending on the chairman to actually raise funds, and when the chairman needs to step down, it's a big challenge. Yeah. Yeah, Daniel?
I think the 10-year rule, just now we were talking, is not prohibitive. Actually, you can write in and you can state why you can overcome that.
You can explain.
You can explain it away.
But what do you think of my suggestions just now about separating a group of so-called truly independent board members and have a stricter rule on renewal, and they actually can step out in a shorter period, like even 5 years, and whereas you have a core team of operational directors, people who are key office bearer, key to the work of the charity and key to the work of the stakeholder relations, to actually stay on and have a longer tenure.
I think that's a practical way most organizations work. I think it's a good idea, but it's something new. I think we can explore that.
Yeah, in CFS, because the work that we do is really managing donor funds, so the biggest risk is really in the area of finance, making sure that the money is well managed. So what we do have is that we have a strict limit of 6 years for the audit chair and the finance chair. So audit chairs and finance chairs cannot stay longer than 6 years. So this is quite similar to your idea of a lead independent director.
Okay. There's a question here on training a board. Actually, this morning there was a question, but I thought it was not quite well responded to. Is training of new directors. I just want to mention that the Social Service Institute actually has a good a string of training actually for board directors, and they also have a tie-up with Singapore Institute of Directors to have a quite elaborate program. You can actually get funding for that as well. So for directors who wish to be trained on, particularly on non-profit sector, they can go to Social Service Institute website to check it out. And another related question here is whether or not a donor should be on a board. Daniel?
Why not?
In fact, for some charity, like I mentioned just now, right, you had to have $1 million before you can be on a board.
There's a membership, right? There's a membership. I think it's okay, but I think the board has to evaluate whether it's more for domination or it's for the sustenance of the mission.
I think you have to look at the whole governance setup.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's checks and balance and is in place. The process is in place. Otherwise, I think it's okay for donors to be on the board. Yeah. Okay. There's another questions. This one on the ED and the board relationship as well. The question is why do we mention that the board is part of board's responsibility in strategic planning? Isn't that the responsibility of the ED?
Well, you need the shared responsibility between the ED and the board member, because basically for any effective charity to be run, you need to have a strategic plan put in place, and that should be the collective effort of both the board members as well as the ED. Right? I know most charities itself, the EDs will come up with the proposal, the strategic plan and all that. And the likelihood is that we do not want the board members, we want board members to be engaged and not just simply rubber stamps. Oh, this is a good idea, let's go ahead and do it. We want the views of the different, the views and the opinion of the different board members to give us the different perspective of how the thing should be carried out, or whether there's a better way of getting things done. I think that's more important, right? Because no matter how, more heads are better than one, so to speak.
Catherine, Daniel, yes.
Just to take on what Wendy has spoken just now about impact, I think this is something, I think the charity sector is quite new to governance and everything. And for directors, helping the management staff measure the impact is important. I think most charity organization must look into this. I think if not, we will have a problem with the donors if you don't look into this, the impact of every dollar that's being spent on it. And part of the role of the director is to look into this and to define the KPIs for this. And if you define correctly, I think the impact can be tremendous, and it will be very, very good for the organization.
Catherine, you have something there?
Yeah, I would like to add that, look at the directors, as skill-based volunteers, because when the role of the board and the directors should be to give the CEO planning perimeters so that we could go out and plan the work, the work plan for the year. But we do not want the directors to just rubber stamp it. We want them to take a look, ask questions and see where are the areas of risk that we have not evaluated, or where are the opportunities that we should be chasing after. So because the directors are, could be sector experts, we should put some sector experts on the board. So they will be able to, give the CEO and senior management, more guidance. And I think when we are talking about board succession, board renewal, we should be also looking a bit about what else do we need going forward? Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, right now, we are looking at doing more marketing. Perhaps, having someone from with a marketing background would be useful. Nowadays, social media is getting more and more important. So maybe someone, with IT, with, maybe someone from Google or Facebook, who would want to join the board. I think that would be, beneficial.
Yeah, just to add on Catherine's remark, just 2 days ago, we're having a meeting about fundraising, and it's regarding the Flag Day and whatsoever. So it just came to our attention that one of the younger board members that we brought in after our last election was that why not use QR codes, digital, because if you go out to get money, soliciting funds on Flag Day itself, some of them will tell you don't have any coins to put inside. So you just tell them there's an app available, you just simply click it, all right, and just donate a sum of money to us. I think that is a very innovative way of doing so. And also, I bring back to the question about, remember you're talking about the government's evaluation checklist, all right, and that basically the ED just simply upload the thing without the
Most
oversight.
times it's not even the ED, you know.
Sometimes not even ED, without oversight. Well, in our organization, we don't. We actually print it out, and we actually have it minuted at one of our meetings and signed by our key office bearers before we upload it. So everybody has a vested interest in that whatever is checked in that list itself is relevant and is correct, right? I think that's more important. So board members must always be in the know, especially for such essential documents.
I think there's a question here about the difference between serving on a board of a listed company and serving on a board of a charity. Yes, it's often I think as David actually mentioned this morning as well, I actually came across a charity where the board members also sit on listed company board, and they try to apply the sort of concepts on a listed board onto charity. For example, in a listed board, typically you have 5 directors, right? 2 executive and 3 independents, and the 3 independent directors will sit on all 3 committees, right? The audit committee, the nominating committee, and the remuneration committee, and each serve on the respective as chairman. So they try to apply this concept and say, okay, on a charity, why do we need finance committee, audit committee, and investment committee? Why don't we just merge into one? Right? We have a single committee that does all 3 functions. Now, obviously, this is, in fact, I was talking to another client 2 days ago about the same situations. So obviously, you've got a conflict of duties here, yeah. So the role as a director of a listed company, I think I mentioned earlier on, as a key office bearer, it's not as clear cut as in a listed company where you are clearly executive director where they get paid, and independent director where they get paid a fee. You don't make executive decisions. You make board decisions. You don't make executive decisions. But in the case of charity, they are a little different. I think that I addressed early on. So maybe going back to Wendy, because recently Tote board is actually has done some exercise in looking at the charity sectors and how we should move forward and what Tote board's role should be in that. Maybe you can get Wendy to explain it, so maybe you can understand what are the additional funding opportunity you can get.
Definitely it's still work in progress, but we had a very exciting time since February and more recently July or August, where we embarked on our 3-year plan. And the concept of developing non-profits capability and capacity, looking at organizational abilities, including board effectiveness, is something that is very dear to our heart, and it's definitely going to be a key priority for us for the next 2 to 3 years. We will be working with our partners to make sure that when we do launch our strategic initiatives, and funds will be provided there as well, it will be something that will be useful for the charity sectors as well as the other non-profits in the other sectors. Many of the discussions from the ground actually came to a few areas. For example, human capital was right top on that list, volunteerism, ability to raise income, looking at maybe new ways of raising social finance. Impact bonds was discussed as a possibility, but those are very long-term things that needs to be developed. But there were a few good themes that I think is also something that we want to look at as a community collectively. One is how we can embrace technology and data. So that came up very strongly in our discussions. The second one is really looking at how we can have not only talent management at the senior management, but also at the more middle management and even the staff level. There is a lot of training going on. Question is it going to help them to stay relevant for the future? So ability to do, let's say, for example, social marketing, social apps development were some of the newer areas in terms of new competencies required. Then there was also the question of looking ahead, strategic guidance, foresighting, looking at how they can stay nimble, stay relevant. Looking at program evaluation was also a very core area. We are definitely very open to many of those ideas, and we will definitely be working with our respective ministries and government agencies to see how we can collectively work together. But nothing beats coming up from the non-profits themselves in terms of changing mindsets, changing how they can also take advantage of some of the funding that will be available, to see how they can do a bit of self-reflection and see where are the areas of improvements, and then work together collectively as a community to enhance the sector's abilities as well. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. Do the panelists have any questions for Wendy? Actually, I've got a question here which is quite interesting because it's not on the usually we talk about healthcare services and all that in the charity sectors, but this one is on religious organizations. How do you achieve effective board in the religious organizations? I'm not sure. I don't have much experience in that, particularly temples and all that. Do our panelists have experience on that we want to talk about? I think churches maybe, but this particular one is probably. I'm not sure whether this is about churches or other religions. Do anybody else have on the floor have any experience like to share in terms of a religious organization? How do you constitute the board and achieve effectiveness? Any volunteers? Or maybe we should do a lucky draw and draw names. No? Okay, maybe I want to, if there are no more questions, I would like to wrap up this section by asking the panelists to do the conclusion based on your experience that you have come across over your many years in the charity sector, of what are the obstacles in achieving effective board, and the 2 or 3 things that you want to talk about and how they were overcome. Need some time to think about it? Ando, I think you're ready to talk, right? Okay.
I think most important for any effective charity board effectiveness, I think one of the obstacles and probably one of the challenges that we face is getting the right people on board. I think during this morning's presentation, who was that? Who was the one who actually, was it Teresa, who actually mentioned about, whether the people are the most important, crucial assets of any organization or so. And then she added on, it's not the people, right? It's the right people that you bring on board. And that is very important because it will set the right skill sets, expertise or experience that you want to bring into the charity. And this must be coupled with the passion. Right? That's very important. And of course, for any board members itself, one of the other barriers that we face is you engage them in strategic planning itself. Like they set the tone and the directions, how we should proceed towards achieving our mission, vision, and have a clear purpose of how we're going to do so, how we're going to direct all activities towards achieving the intended outcome for our beneficiaries. And there's something that is very common among all the VWOs is the sustainable funding. I don't know, probably most of you are aware of this, that most VWOs are not fully funded. Some programs are funded, some are not, and even some programs are funded only at 50% or less. So we must always find a sustainable source of funding to sustain our programs. So this is something that we are always very, very, it's part of our, other than grants and all that, which we also have a lot of KPIs to meet when we want to ask for grants, these are all the KPIs you have to meet before we give you the funds. So these are challenges that we need to overcome. And I always like to reiterate, because I'm the ED, so that's why there's always the need to establish relationships with board members, every individual one of them, all right? And to do so, I like to reiterate is that the ED has to earn their trust, all right? By handling the matters, by handling the situations that entrust to us, as well as the deliverables, so to speak. And succession planning, basically, I felt that there should be some flexibility, all right, depending on the current composition and the vacancies that are available within our sector, because it's still very challenging to get the right people on board our charity. And that's a fact. Because sometimes you ask somebody to join your charity and you set so much KPIs for them, you must do this, you must do that, and they tell they don't have the time. And so what you have. So more or less that we should not only get the right people, but we also like to get the people the right passion. And I truly subscribe that board members should not be paid because they have a higher calling in life, and that's to give back to society. And that's ultimately what they are trying to achieve. And I've also mentioned earlier on about board effectiveness. Basically, it goes in hand in hand with good governance. You have an effective board, you have most likely good governance. All right. And good governance also means that you must have a very, not only a strong board, but also a very strong and effective chairperson or president that can actually set the discipline, the experience, as well as the objectivity to the table. All right, that's very important. All right. And last but not least is regarding competition and impact that Wendy spoke about. All right, it's not common in the VWOs to see mergers, takeovers, or acquisitions or whatever. But I suspect that may be in future that may be the trend. All right, especially you have 2,000 over charities in Singapore, and there may be a need to consolidate to make them more cost effective to run in the voluntary in the charity sector.
Okay, thank you, Catherine.
I agree with Ando on most of the points that he has mentioned. One very practical problem which I face with my board is really the lack of time. Everyone is busy and everybody wants to do a good job, with respect to the organization. But however, they are volunteers, the board are volunteers. So we as senior management, we also have to be cognizant of, the amount of time that we require of our directors. So, it is very important to be able to utilize whatever time we have with our directors effectively. So, meetings have got to be organized well, and agenda must be set. Getting decisions made, at the right time, and not having delay quarter after quarter because somebody couldn't agree, and therefore timing is important, and we do not need to just wait for the actual board meeting to engage the directors. Nowadays you can engage them through WhatsApp, through email, and at any point in time think of all the activities that your organization is doing. Any of these activities could be an opportunity to engage your directors. So you can engage them to come down for a fundraising event or a program that you are running. But take every opportunity possible to engage the directors because they are valuable resources, and the more they understand the organization, the more they will be able to contribute. And again, I want to emphasize the importance of having a good communication. Of course, trust, respect, open communication. But one thing is that on both sides, the directors, the senior management, the ED, all of us must be willing to be open to new suggestions, to new ideas. And for those people who are giving these suggestions, do so in a constructive manner, and do so in a manner that is that would be helpful to management in order to make the right changes. So rather than just saying I don't like this or I don't like that, but it would be great if the directors could actually be more proactive in saying yes, things could be improved. Perhaps you should look at A, B, and C. So be supportive of the people who are working on the ground, be supportive of the ED, be supportive of the senior management, and have the trust that they can do the job well. But of course, we do have to earn the trust.
Okay, Daniel?
I've been volunteering since for longest of time. I think in these organizations, I've been about 25 years at least. And I've seen the charity sector move. And this thing about governance is something very new. It has to happen. We have seen it in England and how they are doing it. I'm seeing now in Singapore. But what we are discussing here is a lot of technical things. And unless we take away this technical and embed it into our systems and our being, we are going to be discussing this the next 10 years. And to be is important. And I also like to state back the original thing that I mentioned about the mission and the vision is very important, because we can be spending a lot of time talking about governance, but the board does not look at the mission and vision, it will be very detrimental to the organization. And like I say, contrary to profit organization, a charity organization is more about the depth of your own mission. You should be seeing less people. Say if your job is to, your mission is to eliminate poor, you should be seeing less beggar on the streets or something like that. And some charity organization, after they have achieved what they have achieved, started thinking, oh, now we have done so much, we've got so much reserve, shall we look into something else? Just now we were mentioning about the death and there's a merger and all that. I am of the view that if you have done your mission and you have done very well, you should close down your and not look at merger and acquisition. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Wendy?
Thank you. As part of the work we've been doing in the sector, I don't have the benefit of too many years in the social sector. I'm quite new, 2 years. I'm still learning a lot, and I'm learning from very good people, including the panel here. But when we were doing a lot of research for our 3-year plan under Tote board, one of the things I realized is that the demand for social services is going to get bigger and bigger, greater and greater in Singapore. No doubt about that. The aged issues are going to creep up on us. Caregiver is going to creep up on us. National resilience is going to creep up on us. And in the midst of all this, question is, do we have enough resources, funding, people, infrastructure, resources to help us navigate through all these challenges? And I don't want to see them as challenges. I also want to see them as great opportunities for the community to come together, to work together. So an effective board is really someone that I feel that they can influence every staff they have, every stakeholder they have that they interact externally and internally, influence every volunteer, skilled or otherwise, to come together to have a common vision, as what Daniel said, a common vision, a common mission to do ourselves out of a job if we can. The shared goals and the collective actions is something that, for the size of Singapore, I think we can do it together and we can do it very well. And I do in some ways agree with what Ando said, that potentially, does it make sense to do some consolidation, because we need to be a bit more effective, a bit more efficient. But before we come to that, maybe every charity can also break down our silos and ask ourselves, can I work with the next charity next door, because we're in the same market space, we're serving the same clients. And it is the board's ability to actually break down those silos to want to work collectively that will, I think, make a lot of difference for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to, I think we should have a big round of applause for my panelists. And thank you for your contribution, your questions, and your patience. Thank you very much, and see you next year.